Yeah, we could turn our attention to the next team. And this was one of my favorite teams to project, the LA Rams.
I really enjoyed pretty much this whole division. I enjoyed Arizona was probably my least favorite of them. But let's get into the Rams right now.
Absolutely.
And, changes, obviously some personnel changes, the main one, the quarterback, but like what else is going on? Were you expecting to see more of the same that you saw last year?
So yes, entering the year, and then Cam Akers got hurt. So where you look at these aerial pies, the overall, again, how we're going to start this is looking at the big picture of the team. I at first had this for more of like a 55% pass, 45% run ratio. That would be historically in line. McVay's even been a little run heavier than that. But I said, okay, maybe Matthew Stafford, they get a little more pass happy, 55-45. And then you lose Cam Akers, your foundational backfield piece. I think they could end up being one of the pass happiest teams in the league. Nobody adjusts to what they're given quite like McVay. I think he is very good at playing the hand he's dealt as anybody in the league. So I ended up bumping up the pass attempts to now 643. That's going to be top 5 in the league compared to everybody else, and now down to 420. So one of the more pass-happy teams versus run-heavy teams. And that's, again, not in line with what his history has typically been, but what I think is going to happen given the current roster he has.
All right. Well, I mean, you expect them to be a pass-happy team, and you got Stafford actually on your big board ranked 10th. Projection-wise, you actually only have him 15th. And this is interesting. This is going to work into a kind of weird discrepancy between Stafford and his 2 top receivers that I'm hoping we can talk about. You've got him passing for almost 5,000 yards, and that's only behind Tom Brady and Dak Prescott. If Dak Prescott even plays this season, we'll see. So you like Stafford. You like him more than the numbers that you actually ended up punching in for him.
Yeah, it's tricky because that's where the Konami code, that upside we talked about, comes in. He's a statue. He doesn't have much mobility at all. So you're not going to get money, much, if any, of those bonus points that come with the rushing upside. There's none of that with Stafford. And that probably plays into him going down a bit to 15. He's going to have to lead the league in yardage and pass attempts to really crack that top 10. I think he also has a good chance of doing that, though, in terms of pass TDs and passing yards. The best weapons, beyond obviously those Calvin Johnson years, he's had in quite some time, though, with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, and just by far the best play calling. We've seen what McVay's been able to accomplish on offense with Jared Goff. I mean, Jared Goff was a top 10 quarterback in 3 of the 4 seasons there, and that's Goff. I really think Stafford could blow the doors off. And 34 pass touchdowns, I think there's upside for a lot more. Now, when I was projecting it out, it was like, okay, so who's going to be the one catching all these? And they don't have these monstrous receivers, but they do have Woods and Kupp, like 2 of the best in the intermediate range at getting deep when they need to. So I have them projected for 24% and 23% market share. And that would lead to 154 targets for Woods, 148 for Kupp. And I had Woods hauling about 68% of those, in line with his career details for averages so far. 105 receptions, 1,312 yards, and 8 TDs for Robert Woods. And Kupp not too far behind at 1,296, 9 TDs on 108 receptions, a little bit higher of a reception total given he works that intermediate, not quite the deep threat. So a little bit lower yards per receptions, a little more receptions. If I'm not mistaken, these 2 ended up being top 12 wide receivers in my projections.
Oh, yeah. I do want to address that. And before I do, real quick, Mitch Chavez just posted a comment. He said, are these projections with 17 games in mind or 16? I'm only wondering, as I'm surprised you don't have a couple quarterbacks over 5,000 yards. You use 17 or 16?
Yeah, I did use 16. I mean, 17 rather, because
okay.
that's what
I was come on, Wolf.
No. And that's a really good question, Mitch. We should have said that right at the top. That's kind of what made this projection process for the first year of ever doing it a little bit trickier, because now we have to factor in another game. But it's such a rare feat. And you look at Stafford's career averages, like he's kind of tiptoed towards 4,700 a couple years. I think this kind of, all of them are, Mitch, to sum it up, projected with 17 games in mind, for sure. So that did make it tricky my first year ever doing it. And some stats might seem a little inflated. There's only a couple QBs, though, that I have projected.
Yeah. You got 2 for 5,000. So let's get into the receivers. And I know we want to talk about Henderson a little bit too, so we can move on, not take too long. But I do want to talk about Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. You actually, so actually your projections for them, you have Woods as your wide receiver 8, and you have Kupp as your wide receiver 9. Now, on your big board, you dialed that back to Woods at 14, Kupp at 16. So this is one of like the prime examples of like you punched in the numbers, they came up with big numbers, and then you just didn't have the stomach to make these guys top 10 receivers on your big board. This would be like the 6th time in history, by the way, based on your projection. The wide receiver duo has 100 catches and 1,000 yards.
Wow.
I think. I want to say.
And you look at them, it's like, who do they really have? Let me bring these guys back in. I know it just went gone for a second here. There's just not a whole lot of competition in terms of the target totem pole. They have been about 20 to 25% market shares since they arrived there under McVay. It just has been a lot fewer pass attempts, which is where, again, I'm kind of taking a leap of faith and saying that's going to be the big difference here with the Rams. They're going to be chucking it all over the place in 2021, given the backfield injuries. And so it's a tricky projection because that, and I guess that's probably why there's a little bit of that discrepancy. Maybe I do need to bump these guys up just a little bit more. It's just so tricky too when you look at the names around.
Maybe them. Not. Maybe you don't need to bump them up. I mean, like, are you gonna pick Robert Woods as your 8th wide receiver?
Probably not, right? Because I think I have him like, and then again, PPR projections, given how many catches I'm projecting this guy for, maybe a little bit higher than like a DK Metcalf.
You got Metcalf at 12th. We're going to talk about that later. You like Woods and Kupp more than Metcalf?
No. Again, that's exactly where it comes down, like the head versus the heart, right?
Now, in fairness to you, since I just blew up your spot with DK, on your big board, you have DK 6 and those guys 14, 16. So, like, no, you wouldn't take them over DK. But it's just interesting with the numbers. Then you kind of got to look in the mirror on him and just be like, wow, do I really believe this? And I know you've done the work. So do you believe it? Do you think these guys are both just going to have monster years?
I really do. And that's what I think makes them such great draft picks, Nat, is you can get them in round 4, sometimes even towards the round and, beginning of round 5 for Cooper Kupp. And I do think they genuinely have that wide receiver 8, wide receiver 9 in them. I mean, Woods has been right around that cusp, like 12, 13, 14 over his last few years. Now with the best quarterback of his career and what I project to be the best, most pass-happy attack, I think that this is the year both of them really eat. So I believe it. It's just also when you look at DK Metcalf and you're like, okay, this is the freak of all freaks. Even if these guys project a little bit better when I enter the numbers, I can't pass up on the freak of all freaks for him. You know what I mean?
I absolutely know what you mean. Yeah, this is interesting. That's why I really like that you've got these 2 separate lists going. It's fun to compare and contrast. Let's get into the running back real quick. Let's talk about Henderson, obviously replacing Akers. You got him as your RB17 and RB20. 9 touchdowns, almost 1,100 rushing yards, 360 receiving yards. Solid season. I mean, your list, you see him pretty much the same on each.
Yeah, 270-ish touches is going to be top 10 most likely among running backs if he hits my projections here. And the team is reportedly all in, according to the latest ESPN report from Jeremy Fowler on this guy. They're not planning to sign any veterans. So after him, I mean, you look at the backfield, and it's Xavier Jones, undrafted free agent, Jake Funk, a 7th-round pick. As long as Henderson stays healthy, I think he's going to be seeing 18-ish to 20 touches per game. Was seeing that last year, even with Akers there to start the year, before Akers really had his takeover. I can see Henderson having himself a monster year. It is just a matter of health, which he has not been able to sustain at the NFL level, but they're giving him the starters treatment. They're not using him at all this entire preseason. I think what becomes interesting is behind him, who is going to be that running back too if something happens to Henderson. Right now, I clearly have that as Xavier Jones, 130 for 508 and 4 TDs, which I think could go significantly higher if Henderson does suffer himself an injury there. He was the first man up in the preseason action this week, looked significantly better than Jake Funk on similar amounts of touches. So I do have him for 508 and 4, but Funk, if you're really, really deep leagues, should be someone on your radar too. I could see him also sneaking in. Right now I've got him projected for nothing, but just a name to keep on your radar in case there's an injury or you get into really deep leagues, because it is one of the more uncertain backfields after Henderson for sure.
All right, last but not least, Tyler Higby at tight end. You got him as 8th on both of your lists, actually. You like him for 68 catches, 8 touchdowns. Who was the guy that when he was out, Higby performed really well last year?
That was Gerald Everett, who's now
Right,
with the
right,
Seahawks.
right. I knew I couldn't remember who it was, but I knew there was some guy that every time he didn't play, Higby went nuts.
Yeah, in 2019, he had a ridiculous 5-game stretch where he was by far the number one tight end and the number one scoring receiving option for across the board besides 2 receivers. It was an insane split where he was on pace for like 16 touchdowns, 1,800 yards. And clearly I'm not projecting that. I've got him here at 68 catches, 782 yards, and 8 touchdowns.
But you have him as a respectable tight end option.
Definitely, there is the upside that those touchdowns could really hit 12. It's that big body in the red zone again without Everett's presence there. The thing is early preseason, you're already seeing Jacob Harris get used really creatively on downfield routes. This nice rookie they've already talked up as like a new toy for McVay. So I'm not going to go overly ambitious on Higby. I have him projected, as you can see here, for a 14% target share, which is the next up after those 2 big name receivers. You got, other than them too, Deshaun Jackson coming in for about a 10% target share. He'll do his thing with 595, 5 TDs, averaging 17 yards a catch. Good for best ball, but I just don't know if you're ever going to be able to project it. I'm not in the Van Jefferson club. I only have him for like 250 and 2 as of right now to round out those projections. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.